Hi there, good day everybody. Steve here with you. It is a beautiful day all around me so far, not like yesterday. I got kind of caught in a bit of a hail squall. Oh my god, I thought that was a real rabbit. It's like, what are you looking at? Seriously, what are you looking at? Are you looking at me? Anyway, never felt so threatened by a rabbit in my life, but it did happen. And it did happen today, which is April 18th, 2021. Not really, but for you guys, it is that day. And y'all know what that means. Another day, another story. But before we get to that, remember, as always, to like, share, subscribe. Hit up my Patreon if you want to help me out there. I'm always posting new stuff there to give you more bang for your buck. The link to that is in the description below, as well as the links to my Instagram and Facebook pages, closely related to the content that I'm posting both here, as well as my primary channel, Steve the Amateur Historian. Head over to that channel as well and give it a subscribe. If you like what I'm doing here, you'll really like what I'm doing over there. Not to knock his channel in any way. So anyway, all that said, we're gonna go back to 1940s Chicago. I don't know why I say that so confidently, like I know anything about Chicago. The furthest east I've ever been is Las Vegas. And it was 1924, not the 1940s. I think I was thinking of another story. So I shouldn't get so into it because I'm going to start just giving you completely inaccurate information. But anyway, it's 1924, still Chicago. And there were two men that were awaiting execution there. It's a brief little piece. The article doesn't even stipulate what these men were in prison for, why they were up for execution. The article did stipulate that they were both African American, which means, I mean, it sucks to say, but it could have been something pretty minimal, especially in the 1920s. It could have been, you know, something that same exact thing white person does, and they would have gotten like a fine. So again, I don't know. Maybe these guys were murderers, or you know, armed robbery, and they ended up having to shoot a few people. I don't know. I did kind of a brief search on the names and couldn't really find anything on my newspaper database, so we're left a little bit in the, you know, in the clouds, in the fog about what exactly these guys did. But they were awaiting death, and it was they were down to their final night. And, you know, as is tradition, it seems maybe it was a little bit different back in the day, because nowadays, or at least in recent decades, when you're on death row the night before, or not even the night before, but for your final meal before you're ultimately executed, they'll usually let you get pretty much anything you want. In this vein, now granted it was the 1920s, apparently the dinner that was offered was a chicken dinner, I assume of superb quality. Now, I don't know if that's just generally what that prison offered, like that was just the standard, or what exactly. But that was, you know, that was your last, I mean, I guess lively experience before you went under, literally for the last time, was they'd give you a nice chicken dinner before they murder you. I'm sorry, I'm not a pro capital punishment person. I think if you're a real degenerate piece of crap, having to spend the rest of your life in prison is a pretty decent punishment, and sometimes execution is just a little too easy. Not the execution process itself, I'm sure that's pretty, well, I mean, you know, back in the 1920s when they were still like hanging people, it would have been, and now they, you know, they have, I guess you could call it, more humane methods. But anyway, I don't want to get off on a long tangent about the death penalty. Just, these guys were, you know, offered the traditional, you know, meal. That was the norm. But these two guys, you know, on their last night of life, they came forward with a request. They wanted as you would say when you're going through like a drive-through, they wanted a substitution for their chicken dinner. You know, who cares if we're hungry later on? We're going to be dead soon. So they requested a substitution that was granted. So these two men were ultimately executed by hanging at 6:35 a.m. April 18th, 1924. So, you know, they would have probably eaten their dinner at some time during the night. And for their replacement, which I think is just, you know, it's an obvious, you know, sad situation. These guys are about to get executed. But I thought it was such a cool way to go out. I almost kind of feel like, you know, I love my food. If I was on death row for some reason, I would love me a hearty meal of just about anything of my choice. And who cares if it gets stuffed? You know, you don't have to deal with the indigestion later. But these guys decided they wanted something a little bit different. They requested, now granted, you know, again, it's the 1920s, so they requested, instead of a meal, if they could listen to some radio programs. The article references both the news article references both radio programs as well as concerts. So I don't know if they were listening to, like, you know, stories on the radio, or if they were listening to like actual, like, you know, music on the radio, or maybe it was a combination of both. But whatever the case, these guys said, hey, you know, for the last couple hours of our life, we just want to sit back, probably, you know, think your life over, because that's probably what a lot of people are doing when they're looking death directly in the face and it's inevitable that it's going to come. You know, you sit back, you think back on your life. Maybe if you're on death row, you think about some of the things you might have maybe done a little differently. Or maybe you would have done it all the same and gone out early the same way. But you just kick back, let the radio play. I assume they were with each other in these, you know, final hours. And so, you know, maybe they enjoyed each other's company a little bit. And they just sat back and listened to some radio programs instead of taking the traditional chicken dinner. And I've never heard of it. I'm sure it's probably happened before, where people have been like, hey, instead of the meal, can I get this instead? It's probably happened under other circumstances, but this is the first time I've ever seen it. I would never think, like, you know, I would think like, oh, here's your final meal, like, you just take the meal, you shut up and take the meal they're offering. It would never occur, especially, you know, you're about to die. There's a lot of other things on your mind. It would never occur to me, probably, of course, I don't know the experience of being on death row, but I feel like it would never occur to me to think, hey, let's think of something a little better, a little more long-lasting than just a meal. Would never occur to me to suggest a substitution for my final dinner that isn't food related. So these guys were unique in that vein, and they went out a whole different way than most people would. So whatever mistakes they did in life, I guess you can applaud them a little bit on how they chose to go out. So what would you do? I know it's maybe a depressing thought for some, but hey, a little mind play. If you were on death row and you decided you wanted to get a substitute for your final meal, and you can pick just about anything else, you know, aside from a reprieve from the governor or anything like that, but just some little replacement, like, say, listening to the radio, or, you know, and a more contemporary possibility, watching Netflix. What would you do? What replacement would you try? That's your homework for the day, and it's blotted out, but this house is adorable. It's small, it's simple, but it's adorable. Anyway, what would you do? What would your replacement be? For me, you know, knowing me, I might ask, hey, can you get me a court and I can play basketball for like the last 6 hours of my life? I love playing basketball. It centers me. You know, when I'm thinking about hard stuff, I used to shoot baskets all the time. It would help clear me out. Maybe it would be a peaceful way to go out, and it would be very much me. I don't know, that's just one possibility. Let me know what you would do in the comments. I'm maybe gonna try to, if I can remember, maybe we'll try to do that at the end of a story. Say like, hey, what would you do in this scenario? Get some engagement between my viewers and commentators, I don't know. But that is the story of two guys that in their final hours decided to do things a little bit differently than the rest. So I certainly hope you enjoyed it. The story, that is. Not the thoughts of being on death row. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, share, subscribe, hit up my Patreon, all those little things that help my channel grow. The link to my Patreon is in the description below, as well as the links to my Instagram and Facebook pages, closely related to the content that I'm producing both here, as well as my primary channel, Steve the Amateur Historian. If you haven't given that a look and a sub, go do it. You'll thank yourself later. Maybe with a little radio program. And all that said, this has been Steve, and I'll see you tomorrow.